You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is the mysterious case of Netta Fornario. Now, this is one with an isolated island, a woman interested in the occult, and so many crazy theories. However, could the answer be much simpler than that? Could it have been medical or possibly even murder? By the way, we are rounding out our ODDtober series. I believe there's going to be one more video coming this month, but do not worry if you are new to this channel. I post true crime, crazy, mysterious content all the time. It's my favorite thing to post, so you will not be missing out. So make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on to never miss a video from me, and it would mean the world if you wanted to join our little family. And if you want to make a girl happy, all you have to do is thumbs up and possibly leave a nice comment down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 1929 on a small Scottish island called Iona, and Netta Fornario lived there at 33 years old. She was a unique character with quite the personality, and it was really interesting to get to know her and to even get to research about her, because she was truly someone who liked to do her own thing, her own way, and didn't care what anybody else thought about her. Netta had been born Nora Emily Fornario in 1897, and she was born in Egypt. Now, all throughout growing up, she really didn't go by Nora. She either went by Netta or Mac by her friends and her family. Netta had an English mother and an Italian father, and unfortunately her mother actually passed a year after Netta was born, and her father really didn't want to raise Netta all on his own, so a few years into her life, she was sent to her grandfather, who lived in London. Now, she began to go to a boarding school there that was for a Victorian lady's education. It was very proper, and of course this wasn't really like Netta even back then, but she did decently. She would go back to Italy occasionally because she did have an Italian citizenship, but throughout the years she was just doing what was asked of her. By the age of 25, Netta would really find her people and where she wanted to be and who she wanted to be fully. And she had actually joined a group called the Alpha et Omega, and no, that's not a sorority. It's actually a group of individuals who like to participate in the occult. They do practices such as ritual magic, tarot cards, meditative trances, summoning spirits. They have ceremonies. Netta loved everything about this and believed wholeheartedly in what she was doing, especially in the fairies. That was one of her biggest passions, and she had always been interested in this kind of stuff, but she didn't know that it was actually something that other people did until this group, and it really showed her a whole new side to life and the world that made her extremely happy. Throughout the years, she transformed her lifestyle. She began to wear these long braids in her hair. She would make her own clothing in the craziest fabrics, and she actually became a vegetarian as well. These were all things that really made her come even more into herself, but now she just needed a place to live that fully accepted her for who she was, and she found that on the small Scottish island of Iona. She'd allegedly read about this place from her favorite author, which was Fiona MacLeod. Iona would talk about this island as a place for magical healing rituals, and it was also one of the spots in the world where the veil between our world and the spirit world is the thinnest, so you could connect and kind of communicate a lot easier there. It was also known to be a place where the fairies roamed about, and as soon as Netta heard about all of this, she knew she was going to go. She told her maid in London that she was headed out for a while to go to this island. However, she didn't know when she would be back, and her maid and everyone around her knew how serious she was, because she packed a ton of luggage as well as furniture. And this wasn't just, like a cute little chair she wanted to bring. This was enough to furnish a small house. Netta had no problem finding somewhere to stay when she finally got there. She found an isolated farm that belonged to a woman named Miss McRae, and Miss McRae was very open-armed to any visitors and really welcomed them into her home. And she had like a guest house that they could stay in. It was a very, very relaxed place because there wasn't much around except for, you know, the beaches and the woods and her home. And Netta absolutely loved this. During the day, she would go out, she would go to the beaches, she would just kind of wander around on walks, and at night, she would practice her ceremonies in peace. When Netta began to get comfortable with Miss McRae, she began to tell her kind of a little bit more about what she was doing there, and the fact that she would often put herself in these trances and she could fall into a trance and stay in it for a week at a time. It had happened before, so she wanted to prepare Miss McRae that if this continued to happen, that it was fine and that no doctor would need to be called. But after she told Miss McRae this, the strange events would just start piling on, and Miss McRae did not know what to do about it. Netta had been on Iona for a few months when she wrote a letter back to her maid in London saying that she had a terrible case of healing work that she needed to do, and she would be losing communication with this maid for a while she did so. This was just another thing that added on to her mysterious actions, but she was a strange woman, and that's not anything bad. So the maid really didn't think about anything, didn't try to contact her. Miss McRae didn't do anything to stop what she was doing. But then on November 17th of 1929, Netta would escalate even further into these strange circumstances that couldn't really be talked out of. And Miss McRae would always go in and kind of check on Netta in the mornings because she would often be out all night doing these ceremonies, and Miss McRae just wanted to make sure she had made it back to her bed and was sleeping soundly. She was always still asleep because she had been out all night. However, on this morning, Netta was up and awake and frantically packing her luggage. When Netta saw Miss McRae, she began to tell her that she needed to go back to London immediately because several people were trying to attack her telepathically. Now, this is not something that seemed very strange coming from Netta's mouth, but Miss McRae said what was even more strange was that she had a wide-eyed look that looked like she was deeply frightened. Netta began to explain further that she had seen a rudderless boat in the sky, and she began to receive messages in her trances from the other worlds through the veil. And as Miss McRae began to observe her even further, she noticed that Netta's silver jewelry that she always wore had turned black. Miss McRae was very alarmed by her actions, but she knew that Netta couldn't leave the island that day anyway. It was a Sunday, and the boat to the mainland didn't work on Sundays. Nobody worked. So she could not leave anyway, and she told Netta this, and Netta was very angry at first. However, she just retreated to her room for a few hours, took a nap, and when she came back out, she was much calmer, and she told Miss McRae she was going to just go on one of her usual walks. And Miss McRae didn't think too much of this, thought, you know, maybe she's okay, because Netta had just told her that she was going to stay on Iona for a little bit longer. She had thought it through, and that's what she wanted to do instead of going back. So, of course, Miss McRae was kind of on edge while she was out during this walk, and it was a windy and cold night that night, and she still hadn't gotten back by nightfall. And Miss McRae thought maybe she was just wanting to do another ceremony throughout the night, so she went to bed thinking that she would check on Netta in the morning, who would be sound asleep in her bed, everything would be okay. However, the next morning she went in and Netta had never made it home that night. Police were contacted immediately, and the search began with many locals volunteering to help. It was, of course, a very small island, and it took people from far away from where the farm where she actually stayed to come in and search, but they did. They helped. They were searching in the bays, the rocks, the moors, and they weren't finding Netta anywhere. However, the next afternoon, two men would find her on a hillside, and it was 2.5 miles from this farm that Miss McRae owned. And it was also on an abandoned village, and this hill was known as Fairy Mound. It was a very hard place to get to, and Netta had talked about wanting to go to it. However, it was so hard that she knew that it was going to take a while to figure out how to get to it, and even then she might not be able to. She was lying near a knife, and her silver cross necklace had turned black on her body. She had a thin black cloak draped over her body, and underneath it she was completely nude. Now, when they moved her body, they actually found that there was a cross kind of dug into the ground from that knife that was nearby. Closer inspection showed that Netta had deep scratches on her heels and her feet, as well as some on her neck, and although these were very strange, the official cause of death was ruled to be from the elements or heart failure. But mainly that was just because it was so mysterious that they didn't know what else to put. Even her cause of death couldn't be determined. They said it was either when she went missing on the 17th at around 10 p.m. or it was in between that time and the time she was found, which was the 19th at 1:30 p.m. So basically just the entire time she was missing, any time she could have died. The scratches on her feet were theorized to be from her running, that possibly she was running from something or to something and then she met her fate that way. And witnesses were of course called in the area, but like I said, it was a very isolated place, and this was only 2.5 miles from the farm, which it could have been a more populated place, but it still wasn't going to be crazy populated. However, some witnesses that were kind of a little bit farther away said they did see something. However, it wasn't a woman running away from anything. It was flashing blue lights in the sky at around the same location that Netta's body was found. Another strange element to this case was that allegedly they found letters in her place where she lived, and nobody could make out what they said. They appeared to be from someone and not that Netta had written them. However, they could not see who it was from or what it even said. They were just very strange. But these letters have not been found today, and they just seemingly disappeared, so it's speculated that maybe those didn't even exist. There was also another witness that said they saw a man in a black cloak walking around the area and they had never seen him before. However, could this have just been another one of those facts that added more mystery to the story, that somebody just wanted to add their own element to it? A friend of Netta's from back in London, who was also into the occult, said that Netta's mental health at the time was going into very deep waters, and that this friend had known that she was going to be in trouble sooner or later and kind of separated herself from Netta. Now, some said that maybe it wasn't Netta's fault at all, that she could have been in contact with something that had killed her basically telepathically, that it had been a physical attack on her body. But the case was closed because there was no foul play at the crime scene. They couldn't find any on her body. The report stated that she had died from either heart failure or natural causes and exposure to the elements, or because of her practices, but there was no actual crime to be looked into, so they didn't. Now, the theories on this case are absolutely wild, and some people don't even want to hear those. However, I'm going to give you a few that I think could really be what had happened to Netta Fornario. And one of which is that her mental health really was at its worst, and that had nothing to do with her practices. However, I know that anything negative, like a dark practice when it's done in a not safe way, can bring your mental health down even more. Anything that you do that brings more negativity in your life can really affect your mental health. However, if she had already had pre-existing mental health issues, this could have made it even worse. I mean, she was saying that people were talking to her, that she was in trances. She experienced or expressed very strange behavior that could be put down to a mental health diagnosis that was not known back then. Netta could have very well been struggling with her own mind, which was causing her paranoia and hallucinations, and everyone just kind of thought that it was due to the practices that she did, but really that wasn't the case at all. It was just undiagnosed, you know, whatever it could have been. Some people speculate schizophrenia. I don't like to diagnose her when, of course, she's not here to say if that was the case or not. But maybe she did just run out to this village where it was hard to get to and she couldn't find her way back, and she possibly did die out there from exposure to the elements. Or there's another theory that possibly she had a real life stalker who was chasing her, which is why she had cuts on her feet. She was running away from them, and he possibly, or he or she, stalked her on the walks that she frequently did and chased her down, and maybe she fell and she hit her head, and that's how she passed. And maybe this person kind of set up this area, this crime scene, to make it look like it was part of her practices because they didn't want to be blamed for her accident accidental death, or maybe this person even hit her in the head or, knocked her out or something. I'm not sure how good the police department was at that time at looking at every little injury, or if they even had the technology to do so, especially on this small island. I mean, a bigger city might have at the time, but did this small island? I'm not sure. But one thing that I keep going back to is, why in the world was her jewelry changing color if it was like everybody was saying? There is a theory that she possibly had acidosis, which is a medical condition in which your bodily fluids contains too much acid. Now, this can be brought on from diabetes, and in fact, Netta's father said that she did have type 1 diabetes. Acidosis can make your sweat acidic, and it can also lead to panic and confusion as well as death. And something about Netta was that she really didn't believe in doctors. She didn't like going to them, and she didn't ever. And so if her diabetes was not getting the proper treatment, acidosis could have been occurring in her body, which could have caused her jewelry to change colors. It could have also been from the elements because she was always outside. Maybe it got dirty. I'm not sure, but that is quite the interesting theory that I found that I thought you guys would love to hear about. I'm no medical expert, but if that is something that can truly happen, that is quite interesting. Now, I'd love to hear what theory you believe happened in this case and what you thought of it all together, because it's probably one of the strangest that I've done this month, and that's why I had to fit it in. I do want to say that if you want to learn more about the occult practices, Wiccan, I would really recommend Harmony Nice. She has a channel here on YouTube. She is a Wiccan herself. She is such a beautiful soul and just person in general, and I love watching her. She's so informative. She also did this case, and she kind of put her 2 cents in about it because she knows a bit more, and so I really recommend you watch her video and her content if you want to learn more about it, because she is definitely a gem herself. And if you want to watch even more strange content and you haven't caught up on all of my ODDtober, there will be a playlist linked down below, as well as all of my Halloween videos linked down there as well, because I did a whole bunch last year too, and they're also quite interesting. So make sure to get your fill before October is over and get in that spooky spirit before Halloween. And don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.